Good morning, Little Masters, and welcome back to today's Tolkien Times, a Prancing Pony podcast production. I'm the Man of the West, and we're going to continue doing what we've been doing since August here on Third Age Thursdays, looking at the poetry and songs from The Lord of the Rings. Now, last week we mourned with Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli as we read through the Song of Boromir. Today, we'll actually have time to get to two very different poems. First up, after Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli bade farewell to Boromir last episode, they began chasing the Uruks who had captured Merry and Pippin. And after spotting dead orc bodies, indicating a dispute of some kind, Aragorn spotted tracks to follow. Swiftly now the pursuers turned and followed the new path. As if fresh from a night's rest, they sprang from stone to stone. At last they reached the crest of the grey hill, and a sudden breeze blew in their hair and stirred their cloaks, the chill wind of dawn. Turning back, they saw across the river the far hills kindled. Day leaped into the sky. The red rim of the sun rose over the shoulders of the dark land. Before them in the west, the world lay still, formless and gray. But even as they looked, the shadows of night melted. The colors of the waking earth returned. Green flowed over the wide meads of Rohan. The white mists shimmered in the water vales. And far off, to the left, 30 leagues or more, blue and purple stood the white mountains, rising into peaks of jet, tipped with glimmering snows, flushed with the rose of morning. "Gondor! Gondor!" cried Aragorn. "Would that I looked on you again in happier hour. Not yet does my road lie southward to your bright streams. Gondor, Gondor, between the mountains and the sea, west wind blew there, the light upon the silver tree, fell like bright rain in gardens of the kings of old. O proud walls, white towers, O winged crown and throne of gold, O Gondor, Gondor, shall men behold the silver tree, or west wind blow again between the mountains and the sea?" "Now let us go," he said, drawing his eyes away from the south and looking out west and north to the way that he must tread. Now, I like the reminder that Gondor is primarily a land between the mountains and the sea. So many of us, and I know I'm including myself when I say this, when we think of Gondor, are often really just thinking of Minas Tirith and maybe the surrounding Pelennor, or if we're lucky, Osgiliath. But the vast bulk of the nation of Gondor lies to the south of the White Mountains, between them and the Bay of Belfalas, and that's where the west wind blew. And it's interesting that in his very next poem, Aragorn returns to the idea of the west wind. In the Lament for Boromir, the first stanza is asking the west wind for news of Boromir. Now, the proud walls and white towers clearly refer to Gondor's capital, Minas Tirith, where are located the crown and the throne. And while we're never really given much information at all about the throne, other than the fact that the stewards just do not sit there, we do get a bit more on this winged crown in The Steward and the King. It was shaped like the helms of the guards of the citadel, save that it was loftier, and it was all white, and the wings at either side were wrought of pearl and silver in the likeness of the wings of a sea-bird, for it was the emblem of kings who came over the sea. And 7 gems of adamant were set in the circlet, and upon its summit was set a single jewel, the light of which went up like a flame. Now, of course, that winged crown was not the original. Back in the early days of the kingdom, it was Isildur's war helm that was used. After all, Anarian's was in pretty bad shape. But in the reign of Atanatar II Alcarin, Third Age 1149 to 1226, that war helm was replaced with this jeweled helm. And this jeweled crown has been resting on the lap of King Eärnil II for almost 1,000 years at this point, placed there by his son Eärnur before he foolishly went off to face the Witch King. But let's move on to the other poem for today. Merry and Pippin have just encountered a strange creature in the woods of Fangorn Forest, an Ent. The Ent, you might say, Treebeard. And when Merry asks, "But what do you call yourself? What's your real name?" that's where we'll pick up.
"Who now?" replied Treebeard. "Who now? That would be telling. Not so hasty. And I am doing the asking. You're in my country. What are you, I wonder? I cannot place you. You do not seem to come in the old lists that I learned when I was young. But that was a long, long time ago, and they may have made new lists. Let me see. How did it go? Learn now the lore of living creatures. First name the four, the free peoples. Eldest of all, the elf children. Dwarf the delver, dark are his houses. Ent the earthborn, old as mountains. Man the mortal, master of horses. Beaver the builder, buck the leaper. Bear bee hunter, boar the fighter. Hound is hungry, hare is fearful. Eagle and airy, ox in pasture. Hart horn-crowned, hawk is swiftest. Swan the whitest, serpent coldest. How did it go? Room-tum, room-tum, room-ti-tum-tum. It was a long list. But anyway, you do not seem to fit in anywhere.
We always seem to have got left out of the old lists and the old stories, said Mary. Yet we've been about for quite a long time. We're hobbits. Why not make a new line, said Pippin. Half-grown hobbits, the hole-dwellers. Put us in amongst the four, next to man, the big people, and you've got it.
Not bad, said Treebeard. That would do. So you live in holes, eh? It sounds very right and proper.
And indeed, later on, we learned that the hobbits were indeed added. As Treebeard is explaining to Gandalf,
I have put their names into the long list. Ents will remember it. Ents the earthborn, old as mountains, the wide walkers, water drinking, and hungry as hunters, the hobbit children, the laughing folk, the little people. They shall remain friends as long as leaves are renewed.
Now, going back to the list as he originally gave it, eldest of all the elf children, dwarf the delver, Ent the earthborn, and man the mortal. This is given to us in the order of waking, not creation. After all, we know the dwarves were created first by Aule, but made to rest until after the elves were awakened. And since the elves are the ones that taught the Ents speech, it doesn't surprise me to find that they're listed first. Also, I thought it was interesting to note that man's characteristic is master of horses, which of course immediately makes me think of Fangorn's neighbor Rohan. But Fangorn's been here for thousands of years, and Rohan is a much younger nation. I wonder if, at least in the Ents' minds, men are just somehow more associated with horses, and I wonder why. But that original list is missing the hobbits. Now, in fairness, so is the entire Silmarillion. But again, going back to the idea that the elves taught them speech. Remember, the hobbits don't appear in elvish histories or chronicles. We read about that in the prologue to The Lord of the Rings. And in any case, as an offshoot of the race of men in relative isolation, they would not have encountered the Ents before, so the missing line is understandable and, fortunately, very quickly remedied by Treebeard. And folks, thank you for joining me for this week's Third Age Thursday. Be sure to come back tomorrow for First Age Friday for more poetry in the Lay of Lathian. Check out patreon.com/Tolkien Times to learn how you can support the show, get an ad-free feed, join my content council, get a bonus weekly episode, and more. And if you're watching this on YouTube, you'll notice the handle is now @PrancingPonyPod, and that reflects the fact that over the coming weeks or months, all of the episodes of the PPP and Rings of Power Wrap-Up will be here for you to enjoy. Though, of course, they'll stay on podcasts, so nothing changes if that's where you listen. And, of course, this is also the home of my new streaming show, The PPP Plays, running Tuesdays and Fridays at 6 p.m. Pacific. Consolidation is the theme on social media as well. Please be sure you follow all the Prancing Pony production shows by following @PrancingPonyPod on Twitter, Blue Sky, Instagram, TikTok, and simply the Prancing Pony Podcast on Facebook. And finally, as Faramir says, go with the goodwill of all good men.